Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our Leadership Success Navigator webinar series. We have David Liddell, President and Founder of Sky Business Solutions, here to present today's webinar, Empowering Employees Through Delegation. David is an executive coach and leadership development expert. He's going to entertain you in this next hour and provide you with some tips and techniques that will improve your leadership skills today. Please welcome David.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I am very happy to be here. We're trying something a little bit new today. We're broadcasting with the webcam as well to try to give that a little more personal touch. Hopefully that works out well. And obviously, if you have any questions, please do jump in and let us know what you may have. We're going to make this as interactive as we can, keeping everyone muted. Just wanted to keep everyone in tune with today's topic, empowering employees through delegation, and essentially what we have here is we have what I'd like you to think about today is keeping the two words in mind: compliance and commitment. Compliance is where people are essentially doing what they're told, doing what they're asked to do, which is not necessarily bad, but I'm not sure you drive a whole lot of engagement or empowerment through telling people what to do. What you're hoping for is commitment. So it's compliance versus commitment. And how you get that is through employees understanding where they're going, what they're doing, what they're trying to achieve, as well as purpose, having their own personal purpose and a connection of belonging to the organization. Today's topic, we're going to touch on one particular area of empowerment, and that's going to be delegation. We're going to try to hit it as deeply as we can in the hour that we have, but if you do have any questions, please raise your hand, or if your question is longer and you want some more personal customization to your answer and you want to take it offline, I'm very happy to answer questions by email or over the phone. You can just schedule a time with me. So with that, I'm going to jump right in here, and we're going to use also some marker. We're going to mark up some of the slides as we go as well, so that'll give you some more direct interaction on what we're going to be touching on as we go through this. Now, so the first question might be is let's start with the definition. What is empowerment? What is it? Why is it important? And I think it's very important to understand what empowerment is and where it comes from. It really comes from leadership. Empowerment is a state of being within an organization. It's about how organizations function, how leaders behave, and the atmosphere that they create. And what it does, it drives employees to take more responsibility, more initiative, to solve their own problems, essentially make their own decisions, which will drive the performance of the organization real time. I'm not saying keeping leaders out of it, but not having, leaders don't necessarily have to be involved in every aspect of it. And we do that through sharing information, rewards, as well as power with employees. And we'll talk about what power really is. I mean, essentially nobody has power over anybody, but we certainly can influence, and that's really the direction where we're going to go. I would like to talk a little bit about delegation and empowerment, how they fit. Delegation is a tool, it's a skill, it's a function of a leader, and it's essentially assigning new duties, new responsibilities to an individual, typically another employee in the organization. So we call that a division of power. Empowerment is the result, or it's an element, or it's a result of delegation. And what it's instilling power with the individuals within the organization to give them more authority, make them a greater part of the organization, drive influence, as well as making better choices. If you think about everybody in an organization has discretionary effort. There isn't someone breathing over their shoulder at every moment, at every time. And what we have to think about is what's happening when we're not looking over their shoulder or when we're not paying attention because we have other things to do ourselves. And that's where the discretionary effort comes in. Empowerment gives them the opportunity to make the right decisions, the best decisions in the interest of the organization. So why does it matter? Well, if you think about it, what we're trying to do a couple of things in organizations that are critical for the long-term success. One of them is competence. You'll see I've got a couple words highlighted on the slide here. Competence comes down to the competence of individuals, teams, as well as the organization as a whole. But you're not going to grow or build the competence of an organization without going through individuals first. So if you think about empowerment in terms of giving employees what's on the screen here: skills, resources, authority, opportunity, and tapping into motivation. this actually will drive competence within an organization. Now, granted, you have to hold them accountable. You have to hold them responsible for outcomes, very important. But you don't want to be telling them what to do every step of the way. You want to give them the desired outcome, and that will drive the competence. The second word here underlined is satisfaction, and that is employee satisfaction. Think about think about the most important people in your organization, key talent, top talent, the talent you don't want to lose. Organizations that have strong cultures built on empowerment and employee satisfaction have a tendency to hold on to top performers longer. It's going to be hard to hold on to them forever, but it holds on to them certainly longer, and it attracts new employees to the organization because employees want to work for winning organizations, organizations that have satisfied employees and strong cultures. So the goal here, before we move on, the goal here overall is creating an environment where employees feel like partners. It doesn't make them business, financial business partners, but they feel like partners. They feel completely vested in the business, and that is key. But the question you have to ask yourself, are your employees motivated through compliance or commitment? And that's a little bit of a misnomer if you look at motivation through compliance. I'm not sure too many people are motivated by it, but at certainly some level, they're going to be motivated either not to lose their job, not to displease their boss, and make sure they're doing what they need to do. We want to drive an organization more through commitment. So let's talk about the principles of empowerment. We're gonna focus on the item number 4 here, delegation, but there are other pieces to empowerment that are very, very important that oftentimes organizations forget about. And one of them is sharing information widely. And what I mean by that is sharing all sorts of information. That information could be financial in orientation, that could be about the company's biggest problems, biggest challenges, biggest wins. What can happen is we think at the very highest level, or as leaders, we're sharing enough information, and that's not necessarily the case. What I suggest to organizations is share as much information as widely as you can, as comfortably as you can. I actually have clients today, even privately held clients, that share their entire balance sheet and profit and loss statement with all of their employees, and they do that for a reason. They want their employees to feel as though they're a transparent organization, they're looking out for the best interests of their employees, and they want the employees to know what's going on. It helps them understand why certain decisions are made and why certain decisions are delayed. So that's very, very important. So think about how much information you can share within the organization, and you can't communicate enough. Until the point where the employee is saying, slow down, I don't need that much information. That's the point when maybe you are, but I doubt you're going to hear that. Second on the list, encourage people to solve problems where and when they occur. As leaders, we're oftentimes promoted based on our capabilities, our competence as good problem solvers in an organization. So when an employee brings a problem to us, instead of facilitating problem solving, we will oftentimes solve the problem for them. So what we're trying to do, and what I encourage organizations to do, and leaders specifically, push problem solving out to the furthest point. Let the problems be solved right then and there. It makes organizations more agile, more responsive, and more competitive in the long run. 3, let people participate. Your employees participate in decision making. Now, what that means, it doesn't mean they make the decisions. What it means is you're seeking their input. So we want leaders to seek input from others that can be considered in decision making. Asking an employee, what do you think? What's your opinion? Do you have any information that we could use to make these decisions? Whether it's used or not, tells the employee that they matter, they're important, and it builds an empowered culture. All right, so the last one being delegation. That's all about expanding the scope of what people do. And what that means is you don't just arbitrarily assign new responsibility. You need to select the right individuals and the right responsibilities so people are actually growing at a rate that they can grow at. And we'll talk about what that means in just a moment. So the question is, when do we use delegation? And I want to share this model with you. This is a model we use for different reasons. I'll use this for individual assessment and growth. We'll use this for team development. We'll use this for organizational development and growth. But we have a model, you'll see here, there's 3 stages: chaos, the chaos stage, stability stage, and the high performance stage. And so we call this our chaos to high performance model. And you'll see where performance management and coaching and delegation kind of fits in here. So performance management is down here, and then the coaching and delegation is right here, and I want you to pay attention to that. So let's just look over here. So you see this middle line, this is, I call this the stability line right here, and this cuts right across the middle, right where the Venturi gets a little bit better and things coming out at a nice smooth rate. The idea is individuals, teams, or organizations can live down here, and you probably have some employees, if you look at some of the descriptors here, live down here. Maybe not consistently, but they have their moments when they struggle. Inconsistent results, unclear about direction, not good team players. So it's really important to look at what we have here and assess where are my team members, where are my employees in all of this, and this is where what I'll have people do is go through an exercise of indicating where their people are over here where it says employee. Well, that's an abbreviation for employee. You'll notice up here at the high performance stage, this is consistent, excellent results, working together, strong communication. And that's really what we want in most of our employees, but as leaders, sometimes we don't know how to get them there. So let's just say you took your team and I asked you, let's say you had 5 people on your team, and I said, why don't you tell me where each of your employees is here? So you might say, well, Dave, I have a couple up here. I have a couple here around the stability area, and then I have John down here who's struggling a little bit. And that, unfortunately for John can't get out of his own way. So what I'll ask you to do next is say, well, tell me where you spend a lot of your time. And most people say, well, I spend a little bit of time up here, but a massive amount of time down here with John, because he's my problem child. I don't know how to get him to where I need to be. What you want to think about here, and let me just see if I can get in here and, I was going to try to erase something, but I'm not sure how to do it with this new system. The idea here is, how do I get John from here up to high performance? Well, this is how it works. You're not going to move John to high performance very quickly because he has to get to a level of stability first. So the first step with John is to bring him here, okay, to a level where he's functioning well, there's some consistency, and he has a platform to move to high performance. If you can get John up here with his peers, then there's the opportunity to move John up in this direction. You'll notice down here, this is more of a performance management conversation below the line. So being very specific on what people aren't accomplishing, the behaviors you're looking for, and asking for a commitment for improvement. Up here, this is where you can actually delegate and coach individuals. This is where you have people who are showing commitment, have the ability, are starting to prove themselves, and that's where you can actually delegate. It's very difficult to delegate down below the line, down in this area. Very, very challenging. All right, let's continue on. So what I like to do, and I do this with every group I work with, I try to make this as real as possible for you. And I'd like you to think about, take a moment here and think about, well, who can I delegate to? Who do I have in the organization who I'm comfortable with? Somebody who is showing potential. Perhaps somebody who's not at their full potential yet, that I know I can groom to become more capable and more competent in their role. And it's not about taking a high performer and pushing them to a point of failure. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that a very deliberate approach to thinking about what is it that I can delegate, something taking off my plate or an opportunity for growth, because that's really what it is. So what delegation is not, it's not getting stuff off your plate. What it is looking very specifically at individuals within your organization that can take on responsibility, that have the potential, the desire, the interest, and the initiative. And you have to very carefully, or not carefully, but specifically decide what it is they're going to take on and how are you going to deliver it, or how you're going to suggest that they take it on. So I just want to give you a few moments here, maybe even jot down a couple names. I'll give you like 15 or 20 seconds. Write down one or two names of people who you could delegate something to. And I'm going to look at my watch here, give you about 15 or 20 seconds. Why don't you go ahead? Okay, you should have a couple names. Now, we also, hopefully everyone has downloaded the worksheet. It's on the screen right now. If you haven't downloaded it, you can download it here right from the Sky Solutions worksheet. You'll see that on the screen there. What I'd like you to do, this is something you can write on, or if you have, you'll also have the ability to type into this. It might be challenging for some of you if you're only using one screen, but the idea is this is a PDF that you can type into it. What I'd like you to do here, you'll see where it says item number 1, that's over here. What is the role or responsibility, and who can assume this responsibility? I want you to start thinking about that. So let me take you to the next page to give you some ideas. We want, there are categories of leaders out there. Some of us, and I have a tendency to fall into that category, I'm a bit of a control freak at times. I've worked very aggressively over my career not to try to control everything, not to try to do everything myself. I'm sure there are people who are participating today that think, well, yeah, that could be me, or I know people like that. What you have to do, and this is everybody, you have to think about what are the responsibilities I have that I could delegate to others that will help them grow professionally. So here's some ideas that are on the screen. Coordinating responsibilities. Think about core work of people who work for you. And these are typical. This is just a representation. You can see a representation of different things that you do or others do. Can some of these things be things that your employees could take on? And could they take them on to help them grow in their professional career, expand their thinking, make them think more strategically, or taking on something they've never done before? So what I'd think about how much time today you spend at tasks, responsibilities, and think hard about, well, what is it I could provide to somebody else? And it could be something that you've done for a long time, are comfortable with, do it better than anybody else, but it also might be time for you to offload that so that you can move on to more important and strategic things that most leaders need to continue to think about. Because if you're not delegating responsibility down through the organization, you're holding on too much, you can become the bottleneck. So take a moment here and on item 1, what is the role of responsibility? Who can assume that responsibility? So you already have 2 names. Once you come up with one key responsibility that you could delegate, who could take it on, and write that down in section number 1 of your worksheet. I'll give you about 45 seconds for that. Go ahead. About 15 more seconds. Okay, hopefully you have a name, a responsibility. Let's focus on one name and one responsibility for now. So this is more realistic for you, so we can focus in on one thing, because as we get more into this exercise, there's going to be more to fill out. And when you're done with the worksheet here, this is something you could actually delegate. And I'll explain more about how it works and how to deliver the message, or how to ask someone to take on more responsibility. But I've used this with many clients, and all the way from frontline managers all the way to CEOs, and the response is, if you work on it, you focus on it, it absolutely works. So what I want to talk about are the elements of effective delegation. I mentioned earlier, delegation is getting stuff, crap off your desk. Effective delegation is providing individuals opportunity for professional growth and challenging themselves. And think about this for a moment. Those who are your high performers, those are the ones that you want to challenge. You want to challenge them beyond their normal duties to get them to think more, grow in their position. That's what most people are looking for today. They want to be challenged. Not challenged with extra busy work. They want to be challenged with new work, new challenges. They want to expand their thinking and their capabilities. So one of the best ways to hang on to your top talent is to make sure they are challenged, because as soon as they're not, over time they become bored and they start looking for a job. Now, I'm generalizing, but that's not unusual. I hear it all the time, and I've heard it from people in organizations saying, I need more of a challenge. It's up to the leaders to do that. So let's talk about these elements, and we're going to go into a lot more detail in these. So I'm going to scan over these quickly now, and then we'll dig into more detail. First of all, you need to describe the role that they're going to take on. What is it? What are their new responsibilities? What is it they're going to be doing? What are they going to be expected to do? And you've got to describe that in a certain amount of detail so that they're very, very clear. I mean, the worst thing you want to do is not set clear expectations. The next thing are what we call boundary conditions. And again, I'll talk about these, and there's different pieces to the boundary conditions, but people need to work within a certain set of boundaries. For those people who need a lot of management or hand-holding, you're going to tighten up those boundaries. And for those people who are more self-starters, want to do things on their own, learn on their own, you expand those boundaries. So we'll talk about that again. Information and knowledge. What information and knowledge do they need within the organization? The organization, I'm assuming everybody has computer systems and file systems and knowledge. Some of the knowledge in organizations happens to be in people's heads. Hasn't been written down yet. So you have to make sure that you're very, very clear when you're delegating something. This is the information and knowledge you need. This is where to get it. And don't for a minute assume that everybody knows where it is, because they don't. You might know it because you've been around the organization for 10 or 20 years. It could be considered tribal knowledge. It's very important to delineate this clearly in the beginning so people aren't guessing. Skills, everyone needs certain skills. If they're taking on new responsibility, they might need new skills. It could be computer-based skills, it could be communication skills, it could be management or strategic thinking skills, but you want to make sure people understand what skills they need, where the gaps might be, because you might know them. In terms of their abilities, you might know them very, very well. But they have to have those skills, and if they don't, this is something that they could be coached on, they could take a training course, but you want to be sure that they have the skills they need to be successful. And then of course, resources. Resources are they could be human resources within the company, they could be technological resources in the company, it could be systems that they use. What are the resources? And that's oftentimes where the information and knowledge resides, but they have to understand how to use certain systems. They have to have access to those resources to be successful. And then finally, support. That support is from you. It's emotional and psychological support. It's not just, hey, I have full confidence in your abilities here, take this on. That in itself is very powerful for an employee, and it does drive empowerment. However, they also, going through the process of learning and growing, sometimes it can be intimidating. They might miss something, they might feel as though they're not succeeding. So they want to make sure that you have their back, you have full confidence in them, and you act accordingly to ensure that they will be successful. Now I want to talk about situational leadership or readiness. You can see here there are two scales. It says we've got directive behavior and we have supportive behavior. That is your behavior as a leader. And where many employees, let's say you have a new employee or someone who's taking on a new responsibility, they're oftentimes going to start over here. You'll see how these arrows go. So they will oftentimes start over here, meaning they're going to need a lot of high directive behavior from you, because what you're doing is you're telling them what to do, or at least giving them a fair amount of instruction or holding their hand, keeping their boundaries tight. And low supportive. The supportive part is they are coming to you for support. They're asking for your input, your guidance, and your direction. So we call this the directing quadrant. And your goal is to move this individual in this direction. So over time, as they become more proficient in their ability, you might be doing still a fair amount of directing, but more supporting. So they're coming to you as much as you might be sharing information or providing guidance. Still, there's a fair amount of heavy lifting in these two areas for you as the leader, but as they start moving in this direction, it's more supportive. Okay, they're coming to you more. they don't, and you have to be deliberate in your approach not to overwhelm them, not hover over them. Let them come to you. So you've sort of got to cut the rope, cut the umbilical cord a little bit here, and make sure that they are starting to work on their own. Ideally, you want them to be fully autonomous, fully capable, fully competent in assuming this responsibility. Depending on the complexity of this new responsibility, it could take longer. Depending on how quickly they learn, because everyone learns at different rates, depending on their background and experience, they might start over here. You never know. But the idea is you've got to assess, is this the right person? That's where we're saying delegate to the right person. Is this the right person for this particular role? And this is a great way to look at it. The situational leadership readiness element is a Blanchard model, and I think everybody can certainly understand how it works. It's not difficult. There's different variations on the theme here. This one just seems to make it much easier for people to understand. So when you're looking at the individual, what is their full potential? Where are they today? Where do they fit on this readiness model? And because that will tell you how much hand-holding or guidance or management they're going to need. Because most people don't want to be managed, they want to be led. The management piece might be providing greater structure and greater involvement in the beginning until you're over in this area where it's fully delegated. So as you're thinking about, if you look at your worksheet and you think about the person you've chosen and the responsibility you'd like to assign to them, think about, okay, have I chosen the right person? Where are they on this scale? And what do I have to think about relative to them growing and becoming successful with this new responsibility? Okay, so I want to talk about the boundary model, and this is really important. The boundary model establishes just that, boundaries, and it tells individuals how to be successful. What many leaders do with delegation is they don't spend enough time spelling out what success looks like. Now, for each individual that you might delegate, even if you delegated the exact same responsibility to 2 individuals, the elements or the criteria of this boundary model could change because it depends greatly on the individual. So if we go back to that previous slide, that's going to tell us how big this box is going to be. All right, and what we're doing is we're essentially telling individuals, and these are the 4 areas of the boundary model, and you'll see on your worksheet, question 2 or item 2 says boundary conditions. Same thing, boundary model, boundary conditions, and I want you to fill that in just a moment. What are the expectations and results of this new responsibility? You've described what you want them to do and accomplish in general, what's involved, but you may not have said, but this is what you need to achieve. It could be something measurable that you can actually, it could be, if it were someone in a sales organization, it could be sales. If it's someone in a production, it could be something measured relative to efficiency or output. If it was something related to customer service, it could be something related to client acquisition or client satisfaction. You have to decide what needs to be measured, and it also needs to be explained very well. So it could be quantitative or qualitative, but what's essential here is that it's clear to you and it's clear to the person you're going to delegate to. Authority level over here, really critical. What happens sometimes, there's always confusion with employees in terms of what their responsibility is. What their authority is, not responsibility, what their authority is. And if you look at the different levels here, act when directed all the way up to act autonomously, and of course there's different variations in the middle. The idea is let people know what their decision authority is. You don't want them to have to run to you every time they need to make a decision. What you do want is you want them to be comfortable in their role and making those decisions on the spot. The more decision making you can push out beyond your sphere of influence, the better. It makes your job easier. It makes them more successful. Non-negotiables are just that. These are anything that's out of bounds that they cannot cross. It could be a company policy. It could be a regulation. It could be personal behavior. I mean, today, as an example, just about every organization I encounter, I think, every organization I should probably say, sexual harassment is unacceptable. It's a non-negotiable. Now I use that only as an extreme. when you're assigning a responsibility, you're not going to say, hey, don't sexually harass anybody, but you might say, but you might have something around policy, regulations, and how you want them to treat people. That's very possible. So non-negotiables need to be clear, and they are just that. Non-negotiables are non-negotiable. They are not a gray area. And then finally, time guidelines. The worst thing you can do is assign new responsibility and not be very specific about when it's due, what the milestones might be, what results are required by what time frame, as well as if it's a fairly major responsibility and it's where you need to check in and help them grow or coach them. Don't do the periodic pop-in, how's it going? That can send a bad message. That can send a message that you don't trust them. It's not what you meant, but it's what they would think. What you could do is say, let's revisit this, let's review this together in a week or 3 days. They're expecting you at that point. It's completely appropriate. The idea here is you're putting an individual in this box here, and you're saying, okay, I want you to be successful. Okay, how I tease my control base, I say, you make your box too small. You make it tiny, but the box needs to be sized appropriately for the individual based on their capability. So keep that in mind as you're working on your boundary conditions. So on the worksheet, what I'd like you to do, you'll see there's 4 sections there, one for each of these boundaries. Just spend a few minutes. Think about the role, responsibility. What are the expectations? What do they need to achieve? Non-negotiables, authority level, and time guidelines. I'll give you a little extra time here. I'll give you about a minute or so to jot some things down. And this is something you can refine later, but let's get a head start on it. Start now, please. Okay, about a minute has gone by. I'll give you a little more time. And for those of you who are not 100% sure you're doing it right, not to worry. I'm going to come up, I'm going to show you an example of this completed in just a few slides here. So give it your best try. Give me another 20 seconds or so. Okay, hopefully you have something written in every box. I know this is I'm asking you to do a lot in a short period of time here, but again, you can go back to this on your own. And as you think about this, and you'll see it on the slide, I'm writing leaders define the boundaries and then encourage people to be self-governing. And of course, self-governing is relative, but it's relative to the size of the box you've created for people. It sets them up for success. And just to give you an example, I had one organization. The CEO's mantra was, "Hey, just go be successful. Go do it. You have full support." That was okay for some people, a small percentage of the population, but there wasn't enough guidance. There wasn't enough direction, and people over time started to flounder. So we had to help them, guide the leaders in the organization to be less vague and more specific. But again, as leaders, we have to adapt to the people around us. All right, so I'm going to give you an example here of what we call, so your worksheet, the elements on your worksheet are part of the elements of what we call the empowerment matrix. And the matrix covers a number of different areas. Again, you've got items 1 and 2 completed. Let me give you an example. This is actually, I've changed the name of the individual, but this individual was recently promoted to be the sales director of an organization who had worked in the sales organization many years. And I've had to abbreviate this a little bit, but you can see with the description says, assume all national sales responsibilities, including management and leadership of the existing sales team, so on and so forth. You can read it yourself, but there's a description there of what this individual needs to take on. And we didn't want to make any assumptions in what this individual understood the role meant, because the individual who he succeeded was far more senior, so they scaled the role back a little bit so this person could grow into it. The expectations was to achieve sales goals and growth objectives, as well as maintain targeted gross margins. Now, there were other expectations, but those are two very key objectives, that this individual understood what the company's growth objectives were and what the margins needed to be. Non-negotiables, they had a top 20 customer list. They did not want to lose any market share with this top 20 customer list. Now that doesn't mean they didn't lose any business at all. It just meant that overall within 20 customers, they were actually growing market share or maintaining market share. Authority level, essentially act and report to the COO. This person reported directly to the COO, and there was a requirement on any discounting, because this individual had responsibility for potential discounting. Anything over 10% had to be approved, and the key thing is for them was weekly sales. They monitored their weekly sales very, very carefully, and it wasn't a monthly thing where a lot of organizations, this organization had key metrics weekly, because year over year matched very, very well. So again, that's one example. There were other time guidelines, but I wanted to give those examples to you to see how that worked. Now let's talk about items 3, 4, and 5 on your worksheet. Knowledge and information. We talked a little bit about that earlier. Let me use the example on the sheet here. So this individual needed to understand the sales forecast, their CRM system, which customer relationship management. So what's going on with customers? What does our pipeline of sales opportunity look like? They had a map into production, very important, so that they didn't exceed production's capabilities. They had to understand their competitors very well, key customers, and understand employees. This is the well, I should say employees, but employee profile and their performance, what made them tick. These were 5 key things that they needed to understand or have access to. So, and some of it needed to be learned. So I'd like you to do the same thing on your sheet, information and knowledge. What is it relative to the responsibility you're going to delegate? What information and knowledge needs to be shared with this individual? I'll give you about a minute or so, or maybe 45 seconds. Go ahead. Another 20 seconds or so. Okay, good. So have a quick look at your list. Make sure you're satisfied with it. And we're going to move on to skills over here. All right. So if we think about this particular individual, the skills they needed, these were the skills they needed, and from this skills list, there were some developmental opportunities. We were able to look at what was here and where the individual was proficient. So forecasting, this individual was in sales prior, understood the forecasting model. That there was not a gap there, but they needed to be sure they knew how to forecast for the entire organization. They had to be comfortable working with the CEO and the COO, as well as the marketing organization, to establish pricing for the coming year. They had to understand what it meant, especially for their top 20 accounts, what the strategic account development looked like. They had to be proficient in employee coaching, because they were an organization big on employee development and growth. as well as accountability, which is the performance management piece. So I cherry picked from a longer list of skills required, but these are ones that, because some of them are very specific and technical in nature or tactical in nature, and some of them are softer skills. But these are the skills this individual needed and were highlighted as the top skills to be successful in their new role. So you should think about the same thing for the responsibility you're going to roll out. These are skills they need. They don't have to have them, but they're going to need them to be successful. So take a few moments here. I'll give you another minute or so to jot down the skills this person needs to be successful with this responsibility. Go ahead. All right, another 10 seconds or so. All right, let's talk about resources. Every organization has all sorts of resources, whether they're technology-oriented, technology systems, people, departments. You've got to really think hard about what an individual needs to be successful, and think of it from a 360 perspective, meaning what from the leadership within the organization, what do they need? What do they need from their peers? What do they need from their subordinates? In this case, we looked at 4 areas. The direct supervisor would be the COO, and the resource there is really coaching and support, what we talked about earlier. The coaching and the support, they're going to need to be successful. And our suggestion here was for the COO to intentionally spend a more significant amount of time for the first 3 months to ensure this person gets out strong and is very comfortable with their position. The SMT, the senior management team as a whole, there needs to be coordination and alignment to the business objectives, which means not just during senior management team meetings, but also this individual needs to reach out and work with his peer group to ensure that the goals and priorities moving forward throughout the year were aligned, because those can easily get misaligned throughout the year. We know how that happens. Finance, for analytics and reporting, I think everybody needs that in every role, but very, specifically important in a sales organization and a sales role. And then, of course, this particular organization has strategic business partners outside, but they provide valuable insight on client information and competitive information. So they're going to use these 4 main resources as keys to success. So for yours, think about yours. I mean, this is I don't know what your responsibility that you're delegating looks like, but certainly there must be resources within the organization, regardless of how big this or small it might be, that will assist this person. So take a moment here and jot down some resources this person will need. Go ahead. Okay, about 15 more seconds. Okay, good. So at this point, you should have your worksheet fairly well completed. I would, before you use this, I'm going to share with you how to use this document when you go back. But you can use this document immediately if you said, "Hey, I'm going to work with this. I'm going to find this individual. I'm going to sit down and ask them to take on new responsibility." There's a great way to do it. Review this. Again, make sure you've got it tightened up. What you want to do, what this does, this sets a very, very clear expectation for an individual. It's their roadmap to success for something very specific. So let's talk about how to do that. I call them reinforcement steps, but the first thing you need to do is you need to discuss this new responsibility in detail with the individual. What you want to do is you want to ask them, how they feel about it. So how you do that is use the empowerment matrix. Now, what you don't want to do is take your worksheet or the empowerment matrix as it is and slide it in front of them. They're going to wonder where you came from. What you might want to do is take the information here and either encourage them to take notes or put it in writing for them so they understand what it is. Putting something in writing or having someone take very copious notes makes a huge difference, and then in them understanding what it is all about and how they can work with this information to ensure that they have success. So use the empowerment matrix, but ask them first. One of the first questions you want to ask them: "Hey, here's something I'd like you to take on. I think you're well suited for it. It's a challenge. How do you think about it?" Assess their comfort level. Most people are encouraged. And just through the sheer fact of asking them to take on responsibility, you're sending a clear message that you trust them, and you want them to take on more. People are usually very happy with that. But don't make the assumption. Some people might be overwhelmed. They might be overwhelmed with their workload. They might be nervous. It might be something well out of their comfort zone. But it's certainly a good question to ask. It's an ideal question to start with. Always discuss obstacles and solutions as you're taking them through the elements of the empowerment matrix or what's on your worksheet here. Make sure that you discuss potential obstacles and how to get around them, and don't provide the solution. Ask them. If they're asking questions like, "Well, what about this? How do I do that?" Try to get them to think about solving the solution. Rephrase it in the form of a question back to them so that you're teaching them to think about solving problems. Now, if they're truly stuck, it doesn't hurt to say, "We'll solve that one together." And then finally, what you want to do is ask what they need from you. Mostly what they're going to need from you is your trust and confidence in them, their ability to come to you with questions without being judged, and the ability to brainstorm solutions as you go forward. But that's the first part. And most people will take on a new responsibility with great gusto. They're going to think, "This is a great thing, wonderful, I like it," and they'll certainly take it on. Item 2 on the reinforcement steps: let them try, observe. You need to stay back and see how they do. You want to encourage progress, praise their progress, and coach any major issues. You've got to let them make some mistakes along the way. That's the way people learn. That's the way they'll thrive in the future. And really, it gives them a much thicker skin. You don't want them to have any failure, any serious failure, fatal failures in the process of doing anything. But you've got to give them room. So let them try, observe, praise the progress, and then make sure that you're giving them support when they are struggling. Item 3, really, really critical here. Establish check-in meetings. Hey, let's check in 2 weeks. Truly avoid the pop-in, "How are you doing? How's it going?" That sends a negative message. It says, "You don't trust me. You assigned this to me 3 days ago. Now you're checking in on me." That doesn't happen with everybody, but you're better off letting them come to you and then meeting up during that scheduled check-in meeting. They feel more confident. They'll have questions prepared for you, and it'll go a lot more smoothly. It's one of the biggest errors most leaders make, and they don't even do it intentionally. They do it inadvertently. And then 4, coach as needed, but don't hover until they're competent. All right. So what you need to do, if you go back to the model that I talked about, I'm going to go back to it now. Remember over here, coach them. As they're coming out of the gate, coach them here. Make sure that they have a coach guiding them, moving them in the right direction. All right. Okay, great. So what we have, hopefully everybody has their sheet complete. This is a wonderful tool. You can use it today. If you said, hey, I'd like to try this today, you could sit down with an individual, follow the instructions on this previous slide. Very important that you go through these steps. You won't have to memorize these steps in the long run. As you become more proficient yourself in your ability to delegate, it makes sense, but don't skip over steps. Don't make any assumptions that people are comfortable. Don't make assumptions that people have all the information, and certainly use your leadership coaching abilities to guide them to a level of proficiency where they're on their own. And hey, guess what? Then it's time to challenge them again. So with that, we have a few more minutes. I'd like to take any questions that might be available. And by the way, don't forget, we have our next webinar next month, July 21. That's all about coaching success. So what we try to do, each one of these webinars is standalone, but we do try to cascade, leverage one to the other. So you see coaching for success, how accountability drives performance. We're going to talk about that in July. But are there any questions?
Yes, Dave, we have a few questions here. First one is, how can you combat the idea that people say, I'm just insert job role here? I'd like to expand the scope and perceived scope of my coworker's role and what their responsibilities are.
So if I take that, the way I understand it here is they've defined their role in such a way and don't seem to be willing to take on more responsibility. So with that, how do you challenge them further? I think a real important, not knowing the individual, a real important thing to do. One of the very first things I would do in this particular case is try to understand what truly motivates this individual. Most people are motivated. They really are. They're motivated by something. We're all motivated slightly differently. Some people might be motivated by success. Some people might be motivated by providing, doing a great job. Some people are motivated through relationships. There's all different reasons. So I think the first and most important thing is to find out what truly motivates this person. If you are struggling with that, it's going to be very difficult truly to move this person from where they are to where they need to be. If they're just punching the clock and they have no interest or desire, then you're going to be challenged. That you might, I hate to say this, but you might have to just rest on the fact that they're not going to go further. But I would say the majority of the time, most people, it's a function of leadership and them not understanding the entire environment. So once you understand what motivates them, then you have to connect them to the business. One of the things I talked about earlier was empowerment as people feeling belonging, feeling part of a team, feeling that they understand where the business is going. Most people really just want to have a connection to the organization and want to know that their contribution matters. If it matters and they see their contribution providing value to the business, through their filter of motivation and success, they have a tendency to have that desire to move forward. So I think you have to get over that hurdle first. Once you've figured that out and you know how to connect what motivates them to what the business drivers are, then you can start challenging them in the way that would make most sense. For the individual asked a question, I'd be very happy to take this offline and talk about specifics, because there could be some detail within this answer or within the question that I don't understand, only because we're doing it the way we are. And I'd love to brainstorm it with you to see if we could come up with a very specific and customized solution or approach for you. But hopefully I answered the question for you.
Alrighty, we have another one. In your when to use delegation slide, how do you handle an employee who shows no initiative to move above the stability line?
Okay, well that's kind of similar to the last one. I think that question essentially, my answer is going to be very similar, because that's really what the last question was all about. Someone that's hovering below the stability line either doesn't have a very clear understanding of what needs to happen, or there is a culture within your organization that may not have enough accountability. That's one thing I hear an awful lot within organizations, and I hear from the employees, not the leaders, that we're lacking accountability. Some people are held to a different standard, and where the lack of accountability comes in, there are certain individuals who can hide and hover below that line. Really what you have to do is you've got to establish very, very clear lines of what it means to be successful, or what it means to get to that stability. Let me just go back to that because I'll reference it. What it means, sorry for all the mess here, but what it means to be here. Individuals that hover down here and just you don't see any progress going up, what happens is they really aren't clear how to get here or what that is, and that's often the function of leaders not being clear about expectations. Now, it doesn't mean someone down here doesn't have a bad attitude. That could be the case. That's more rare than you think. It's really just these people not understanding what it means to be at least a mid-level, contributing member, what it means to meet the minimum performance requirements. So if you're down here, you really need to think about how, are they clear about what's here? And I'll tell you, in most cases, they're not entirely clear, or their understanding is, hey, this is satisfactory down here, so they play that role, or to that level, I should say. It's the leader's responsibility to say, no, this is where you need to be, and by the way, I want to get you up here. The challenge of having too many people below the line is that you spend a massive amount of energy down here with not enough return. You want to spend your time with these people, and you want to get them up here. If you got someone who's not even getting up to this level, then you got to consider, if you've done everything right, you got to reconsider if they belong in the organization. But that's a truly last resort.
Alrighty, we have another one. When delegating, what happens if the person is not comfortable taking on new responsibility?
Yeah, good one. If they're really not, or if you're not, it's worthwhile having that conversation. And I'm scrolling forward here just to get to the slide where we talked about that. Right here, assessing their comfort level. Are they comfortable taking it on? And that's why you want to ask that very early. You don't want to assume they are, but I think what you want to do, if they're not, if you sense they're not comfortable, if they come right out and say they're not comfortable, explore their concerns. And what that will do is that will bring out things like obstacles, and then you can discuss solutions with them. What you're doing is you're taking them through a process of thinking for themselves and becoming more competent through a teaching approach, more of a Socratic approach. So asking questions, understanding what their concerns are. If after your conversation you really feel as though they're way over their head, then you've got to make a decision. But it's okay for them to, if someone says, really, I can't take this on because I'm too busy, I'm stretched thin. I mean, there are situations today, and I see them a lot, where people are really stretched thin, especially your top performers. So you got to be very cognizant of how you're assigning responsibility or delegating responsibility. If someone is truly overloaded and you feel as though this would be a great learning experience for them, help them figure out what they can move off their plate. And you could help them by reassigning that to somebody else.
All right, I think we have time for one more quick one. Regarding company resources, shouldn't the employee already know what is available to them? Sharing this seems redundant.
Oh, okay. I would say don't make any assumptions on that. Be very careful. So much of the information available to people in organizations is hidden on a drive somewhere. It's not easily accessible. I've heard situations where someone says, I didn't even know that system existed. I don't know how to use it. I don't have the password, after talking with them for 3 months, saying, well, I didn't even know that was there. There are a variety of misunderstandings related to information. You can't share enough. And if someone says, yeah, I know that, well, the worst thing that happened is you've just been a little redundant in terms of sharing how much information. So no, if that's the worst case, but I would say, especially with when you're challenging somebody, be very, very clear about where people can find things, what's available to them, and where they can get the information, or what guidance they can seek as they go through this, because you may not have all the answers. Certainly, certainly you may have many of the answers, but it might be a responsibility that you've taken on, and you have to think very clearly, how have I been successful? Who are the people in the organizations, or what was made available to me where I was able to be successful, and share it. It can't hurt.
That are the end of our questions, David.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. I really do appreciate it. Hope to hear from you next month. If you have any questions at all, or you'd like to do a deeper dive in anything you weren't able to ask here today, please send me an email, or you can simply schedule a call with me. My information is right there on the screen. I'd be happy to do so. If there's, and we'll have this presentation, it's recorded. We'll have it available very shortly on our website. So if you want to share it with others, you can certainly do so. Thank you again. We'll hope to see you next month, and have yourself a great afternoon. Bye now.